Okay, guys, welcome to the Sales Architects fourth podcast. Today I am joined by Tom Cheriyan, who is the head of Sales Enablement at OwnBackup. Hey, Tom, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I had a good Christmas. We're just recording this towards the back end of January. I had a really nice Christmas and a good New Year as well, albeit inside. But hey, what can you do this year? How about yourself? How was yours?
Christmas was good. I would say the biggest learning lesson that we had is we will never give our kids toys ever again because it's not that they didn't like their toys, it's just that they liked each other's toys, and it was just more fighting than actual appreciation. So I think 2021 and beyond, we're going to do books and see how that works out.
Awesome. Okay, so Tom, can you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are, what you've done, where you're working at the moment, and where you've worked in the past as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Tom Cheriyan. I am the Sales Enablement Manager at OwnBackup. Taking like a few steps back and reflecting back on just like who I am. First of all, I'm a father of two awesome kids who I just spoke about, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, so based out of Westchester, New York. I've spent the last 10 years in enterprise sales. So I've been fortunate enough to work for some pretty cool companies like Gartner, Yelp, Oxford Economics, and the like. Outside of just actually being in enterprise sales, both that, by the way, as an individual contributor and as a sales manager, I've also spent almost the last 6 years as an adjunct professor. So I teach 3 courses at the City College of New York. 2 out of the 3 are within the graduate school, and the other is an undergrad course, engineering economics, engineering and business law, and project management. So
Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
that's my life in a nutshell. Not an overachiever at all.
And how do you find teaching and holding down a professional position at the same time? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't be able to do it if it was during the same time. But the academia requirements on my end, it's once a week or
Hmm.
twice a week, actually, since I teach 2 courses a semester. And they both take place in the evening. So it's like usually like 6:30 to like 9 o'clock at night.
Got you.
Yeah, so it doesn't interfere too much with or at all with work. Definitely interferes more on the personal home front, right? Because I basically come home, or if I'm already at home, it's just like literally close one Zoom session, open up another Zoom session,
Sure.
and now I'm wearing the professor hat.
Hmm. And
Yeah.
I guess teaching folds quite nicely into your day-to-day job, which is sales enablement. In a way, you're kind of teaching a sales force of people how to do things better, how to improve themselves, and how to improve professionally as well. So it all kind of weaves together, right? It's all towards the same goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I love teaching. Teaching is definitely one of my favorite things to do. Just I call it the oh shit moment, but when you get to see from a student perspective, like
Mm.
the gears turning and they actually understand or have absorbed what they've been learning, it's definitely a great feeling. I'll definitely say this up front. I'm not doing it for the money because the money sucks as a professor. But outside of that, it's definitely great to see that you are having an impact with students. You know, whether it's in an academia setting or in a professional setting in OwnBackup.
Mm. And it's good for the soul, right? That's the important thing.
Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. So you mentioned own backup there. So I know that you guys have just gone through your kind of annual boot camp and your sales kickoff at the start of the year. Um, as the kind of head of sales enablement there and moving into 2021, what were you covering in that kickoff? And how's that going to translate into performance for the company this year, do you think?
Yeah, so a good chunk of our content that we covered at SCO, I can't talk about because we just have a lot of
Sure.
awesome plans for this year. But what it really came down to from a SCO perspective, we had a few goals and objectives. So one of the first goals and objectives was obviously what are we painting to the for the future for everyone in sales, right? Because it's really important to understand, okay, are we still doing the same motion as we did in the previous year, Or are there new things coming down the pike that we need to be mindful of, that we can get excited about? So that was one objective and aspect of SCO. The other aspect, and I kind of think of it like football, and I'm definitely the last person you would think is like, like a sports geek or a football fan, because I'm not. But if you think of like your top coaches and your top football teams, like what are they doing when they're not like playing an actual game, which is like they're practicing their fundamentals, right?
Sure.
No matter how good the team is, like they're running drills for the rest of the year on like throwing, catching, basic plays. And that was the other part of SCO, which is let's go back to the fundamentals of sales, and let's reinforce these fundamentals. So we were reinforcing fundamentals like storytelling. It's obviously important to know our product or your product and the product pitch and the product value proposition. What's really even more important is how do you tell a story behind that, right? I can give you like how awesome OwnBackup is, how fast we are, all of our specs, blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, is that what you really want to hear? Or you want to hear how, a person that's similar to you or a company that's similar to you was able to leverage OwnBackup that had a meaningful impact to them, whether it was for their company, whether it was for their personal or professional success. Like those are the stories people want to hear. And the trend and push that we are trying to enable our reps for 2021 and beyond is that outside of being the master and commander of the OwnBackup domain, like you have to be a great storyteller. And what we're seeing as a common thread amongst our top reps is that they are really awesome storytellers. So that was part of our focus for our SCO last week as well.
Got you. So can you walk me through how you can improve someone's storytelling capabilities? Is there a kind of particular drill that you guys go through or some kind of activity that you do that helps enable people to be stronger storytellers?
Yeah, so we've currently implemented a new sales methodology at OwnBackup. So we're partnering with Winning by Design. And the formula that Winning by Design teaches as it relates to storytelling is there's three common elements. So the first common element is you're stating the problem, right? Yep. And I think that's really important up front. Like if you tell me a story or you're going into your product pitch, but I don't even know what the problem is, like what's the context? How can I relate? So sure. Telling the problem is a really important component of storytelling. And how effective are you telling that problem? And are you telling it in such a way that the prospect can relate to it? So are you mentioning their name? Are you mentioning their title? Are you mentioning the company or industry that they're coming from, right? Like all of that, metadata are elements to help the prospect relate to, the antagonist, so to speak, in the story that you're about to tell.
Sure.
And so from the problem, now it goes into what was the solution, right? How did the antagonist of the story, how were they able to solve that problem, right? And typically that involves that person or persons being able to work collaboratively with OwnBackup. They figured out the problem, they implemented the solution, and then you basically end off the story with how this person or person saved the day, right? Like what was the rational impact it had? What was the emotional impact it had, to that firm or to that individual? Were they able to avert like a major crisis as it relates to their data in Salesforce? Were they able to get a promotion or another job offer at a better company, right? Because they were able to show to their industry or to the world that they actually know what the hell they're doing when it comes to backing up and recovering data in Salesforce.
Sure.
So those are some of the key core elements of being able to tell an effective story.
Got you. And I guess, like you say, appealing to someone's personal, emotional connectivity with the story is more important in many cases than contextualizing it within the company or the industry or the the position that they hold. It's much more about the personal impact than the business's advantages or benefits from the product itself, right?
Yeah. And then there's also like the art to storytelling. So, we can take the same type of story or plot, but you're going to tell it differently if you're talking to, let's say, a Salesforce admin versus like a CIO, right?
Sure.
The CIO is going to want to see the plot be a little bit more different to him or her versus someone that's actually managing Salesforce data day to day.
Got you. Okay, cool. So presumably this year was the first year that whole process, the sales kickoff, was completely virtual, I guess, because are you guys a company that sends everyone to a certain location and gets everyone together normally?
Absolutely. So I think in years past, we've met in Atlantic City, and we would fly everyone nationally, internationally, and we'd meet up in Atlantic City for a week.
Okay, and how did it work this time, now that you guys presumably were doing it virtually? How does the storytelling translate over a completely virtual format as opposed to being in person with colleagues?
Yeah, so we understood the problem, I would say early Q3 or Q4, where as we started planning for SCO, one of the elements we understood is the opportunity to do it face-to-face. Like, it's just not going to happen, right? Because obviously we don't have the vaccines, it's not safe. So we have to keep all of those things mindful. So from that perspective, it's okay, great. How do we pivot to doing it virtual? And again, it's like taking 2 steps back to move 1 step forward. So first we had to define, okay, for SCO 2021, what do we want our goals and objectives to be, right? So we had a theme for our company in terms of, the direction we want to go towards, in terms of like bringing more logos on board, achieving a certain target from a revenue perspective. We put a whole interesting theme around that, which I can't really talk about, but every SCO has to have kind of theme.
Understood, yeah.
That being said, once we understood what our themes were and what our objectives were, great. Outside of just like the traditional keynotes you would expect to have from a particular SCO, right? So having your product leader set the stage and the vision of how our product is evolving, within the next year, having our sales leaders do keynotes with respect to how are we, growing and evolving and changing from a sales leadership perspective. Same with our CEO and other key stakeholders and leaders within OwnBackup. What are we doing from a rep perspective, right? What are the goals and objectives we want for them? Because what we didn't want to happen, and I think this would result in SCO being a failure, whether it's virtual or in person, is reps are walking out of SCO the same way that they're walking in, right? Like, they just got all this great information, but was it really more of a nice to have that we could have done like via email or Slack?
Yeah.
Versus using this time together, which is really expensive, right? Like, we're asking people to not sell and participate in a week-long event from a SCO perspective. Like, they should be getting something out of it. So that I was particularly responsible for from a SCO planning perspective. And so the goal and vision from my perspective is it's got to be enabling, right? Every piece of content, every session we're delivering specifically to our sales teams, they need to be walking out of that session better than the way that they're walking in. And so that I think leads really well from a virtual perspective, because one of the things we've done across all of these sessions or breakouts is that we kept it, first of all, 50 minutes long, and each day for SCO was no longer than 4 hours.
Okay.
Because there is such a thing as Zoom fatigue, right? Like, you can only sit in front of your screen for so long, consuming content or even participating. So we wanted to keep it shorter than I think your typical average SCO would be, where if it's in person, it could be like a 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. kind of thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we kept it for 4 hours long. And then within those 4 hours, we had a keynote at the start and at the end. So we had 2 hours in between. And in those 2 hours, we broke them up into 2 sessions a day, every day. And the format and style typically was, okay, let's teach our reps something new, whether it's a new sales process or a sales skill. Let's break out everyone into groups. So using the Zoom, I think, breakout or rooms feature.
Sure, yeah.
Where, if you have like, let's say 30 reps in that particular track or session, they all get into groups of 5. They take what they just learned, They practice it together as a group. They nominate one person from that group to basically represent them. And then when everyone gets back into the main session, they have to role play that now with sales leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So I love this style and I love this format because it's not just about, hey, let's just give you this information and then we hope and pray that you know it. It's like, no, now you actually have to deliver it. And it's intense, it's quick. It's not meant to be like, hey, you do it once and you got it, right? Like there were groups or individuals that stumbled, but that's okay because we want our reps to stumble with us first internally versus doing it live with the prospect.
Exactly. It can be a lot more damaging to a rep's confidence if they have that first stumble when they're in front of a client, right? It's can be unrecoverable at that point, whereas if you can coach them through it the first time internally, then helps to pull them out of that and do a better job when they're in front of the client.
Yeah, and there's something that I share a slide with now and again with the field, which is and I'm sure you've seen this, it's called the forgetful curve, which is basically once you first get exposed to the content, to like 5 days later, like your retention of it is like about 10 to 20%, which is scary. But like, this is how our human brains work, right? Like a week from now, you're going to forget all about this podcast, which is unfortunate. But that's how our brains work.
Yeah.
So if we can implement exercises or tools to help our reps retain that knowledge longer, such as role plays or pitch exercises, the retention of that information stretches out a lot longer. And that's why from a sales enablement perspective, like the better we can do at the fundamentals, like writing better emails, doing better cold calls, doing a better job when it comes to having, like a fun session, which you wouldn't describe with a prospect, right? But like if we can make doing our discovery process fun and engaging, and most importantly, informational both ways, between us and the prospect with OwnBackup, it's going to be a win-win-win, and it's just going to make the rest of our process with our prospects a lot easier. And that's like the feedback we've been getting. So if you check out the reviews on G2 or the Salesforce App Exchange about OwnBackup, it's kind of scary, but a lot of our customers aren't writing about how awesome the product is, like they do, but they also write about how awesome it was to work with OwnBackup as well. And you just don't see that with other companies, right? Like, oh, it was great to do this deal with Microsoft or IBM or whoever, right? I mean, and again, I'm sure they do, but like we're seeing that more often than not when it comes to how our prospects love working with OwnBackup, just from a pre-sales perspective.
That's awesome. That's great. And I guess your role as the sales enabler or the head of sales enablement, and you've got a team that you're growing at the moment as well, is really critical to that success, right? Because without having a structure around how you approach it and how you train for it and how you drill for it in your off days, in your not on your match days, all of that's going to contribute to the success and the performance of the team. So I guess my question is, what do you see the main advantages of having a sales enablement function are, other than consistency across your sales force and kind of instilling all of this knowledge into them? What are the other advantages, especially when a lot of the guys that are going to be listening to this podcast might be smaller business owners thinking about maybe introducing one person to help with their sales enablement of a fairly small commercial team. So yeah, what do you think the advantages of having a sales enablement function are within a business?
Yeah, I think there's obviously a bunch of benefits. If I couldn't share any, I probably shouldn't be working here any longer. But let me share a story first, because I'm thinking about one employer in particular where we brought on board this sales enablement leader, and once this person started actually pushing out enablement content to the rest of the field, the first thing this person was pushing was this like risk or DISC personality assessment.
Okay, I've done one of those before. Yeah, DISC.
Yeah, it's weird, but it's like this super high level or advanced like framework to identify what personality your prospect fits under, and then asking them questions based on their personality type.
Yeah.
And this was the first type of content this person is pushing out to the field, where what everyone really needed a refresher or a foundation on was just the basics of our business.
Sure.
So it's kind of like a backwards way of saying, like, from a sales enablement perspective, or from a sales enablement leadership perspective, my first initiative and focus at OwnBackup was just building out that foundational layer of content. Because whether you're, a small, medium-sized business, or whether you're an enterprise, like, let's think about it from a new hire perspective, right? Because, whether you're hiring like one person this month or 30 people this month, or 500 people this month, the question is always going to be like, what are the things I need to know so that I can hit the ground running? And so my mission is that when reps get onboarded at OwnBackup, and especially after they go through boot camp, which is this week-long intensive process where we're basically helping our reps understand our business, our product, our pitch, I want to empower them so that right after boot camp, they are confident to picking up the phone and to be able to have an intelligent conversation with a client or a prospect.
Sure.
If they're not doing that, what the hell am I doing? Right? And what's the point of boot camp in the first place? And so, to answer your question, that should be the focus from a sales enablement leadership perspective. And I think that's also the value of hiring someone from the outside in, because they can provide that perspective and level set with leadership. Hey, this is all the content we have, but this is the experience that it currently is today for our existing reps and for our current reps. So let's restructure this content, or rebuild or build this content so that we can address these problems and ultimately go to market either faster or better. Let's reduce our sales cycles, or maybe we increase our sales cycles, but we're getting bigger and better deals done. But it all starts with that foundational layer of training and content. And if you don't have that yet, like, what's the point of doing anything else, right?
Sure.
Like the DISC personality training. What's the point?
Makes sense. So walking before you run, and filling gaps before you start implementing whole new strategies and processes on top of something that's already broken potentially, right?
Wow. And I took it like one step back. Like, we have to crawl first.
Sure.
So one of the things I did at OwnBackup when I started, because we had a lot of this great content. When I came on board, I started my first day at boot camp. But at the end of that boot camp, I told my boss at the time, like, I don't know the elevator pitch for OwnBackup yet. Like, with my 10 years of enterprise sales experience, like, I'm not ready on Monday to pick up the phone and cold call. He's like, Tom, this is why we brought you on board. Like, you own this, let's re-architect everything. And so that's what we did. I also had to build or buy some tools to help us do that. And it was just maybe perfect timing due to COVID and the world going into a virtual setting. But we made the investment of procuring an LMS, which was Brainshark.
Cool.
Building all of that foundational training in Brainshark with the role plays as well. So reps, after they took the training, let's say for our core product training, backup and recover, they would have to record themselves in Brainshark delivering the pitch. And on top of that, they would get graded by their manager. They would get feedback. In a lot of cases, they would have to re-record to get it up to a point where it met our new standard of what a great pitch looked like. And that feedback was instrumental. And then the great thing as well is that pitch doesn't just like live or die in Brainshark. Like, it gets thrown into this leaderboard. And so what's really cool is from a new hire perspective, because I think there's like, dozens, if not hundreds of different ways to do a pitch for any company or product.
Yep.
But from a new hire perspective, now I can see how is this leader at OwnBackup delivering our pitch? How is this rep in this geo or in this segment delivering the pitch? Because maybe they are all doing it differently, but similarly. So I can now take the best of everyone and now make it my own pitch even better. So now there's this social learning component which we've introduced to OwnBackup, which never existed before. And what we're seeing, or what we have seen in 2020, is a lot of the new hires that we brought on board that went through this experience, they either made it to club or at least hit their annual target, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So yeah, so I guess we were actually introduced through the conversation that I had with Aaron Evans, right, which was a couple of months ago now, and he was talking about various different tools that you can use to improve your sales enablement process and conduct better analysis. And effectively, I guess the whole point of those tools is to be able to practice and run pitches internally and test materials internally and analyze them in a way that allows you to improve them before you go out and basically do it by trial and error in front of a client, right? In the same way that you were talking about at your boot camp, you'd rather that people get it wrong pitching to someone else internally on the boot camp than doing it in front of a customer. So what are the kind of metrics and use cases that you have for these LMSs and other tools that enable you to really fine tune and increase the performance output of the teams? Is there one particular metric or one particular dashboard or type of usage of these tools that you think is particularly useful for people to go and check out?
Like from a metric or KPI standpoint, not really.
Mm-hmm.
The way I'm using Brainshark and the tools of enablement is to really, like you said, like we want our reps to practice and fail with us internally versus doing it live with the prospect. So for example, in Brainshark, we've built out like a number of like role plays and coaching activities where we paint to our reps like different scenarios. So for example, what does the product pitch for, again, our core product backup and recover look like if you're pitching to the Salesforce admin of a 500-person technology company versus the CIO of an insurance company that has 5,000 employees? Two different pitches, two different types of customers, but it's the same product.
Got you. So it's like scenario, placing your reps in a scenario and then doing an analysis of how to best run a pitch through that scenario and then comparing the outputs, I guess, between different reps.
And the goal is to do this exercise as much as possible. So my cadence is we should be running these coaching activities at least once every month or once every 2 months. So I've just put everyone through SCO the last week, so I won't be doing a coaching activity in Brainshark to the field at least anytime soon. But by next month or the month after, like let's practice our fundamentals again. Right? How do we deliver the product pitch to this type of customer in this type of industry? Or how can we tell a really great story about our archiver product to someone who has this type of role in this type of industry? And get reps to practice over and over and over again and let them build that confidence that, hey, I have actual ownership over this. And then basically what happens, and this is like a KPI you can't measure, when the rep is delivering that talk track to a prospect, like what's the KPI to measure like how authentic you are or how confident and credible you are, right? What's the KPI to measure like how not nervous you are when you are delivering it, right? Like these are things we can't measure, but we also know these are things that have a huge impact, right, to the buyer's journey and whether the prospect at the end of the day wants to actually go on that journey with you and have follow-up meetings with you, or, hey, look, thanks for your 30 minutes, but I'm not interested. I'm moving on. So that's what I'm working on, especially those soft skills as it relates to authenticity, credibility, confidence. And the way you build those things up is by doing these activities, these role plays, whether it's through boot camp, whether it's through your manager, whether it's done in a workshop or a classroom setting, or whether it's in Brainshark. These are all of the channels that we have available to us. And so we're taking advantage of all of them. And we just go through these fundamentals over and over and over again. And again, we're seeing that it's having a huge impact to our win rate.
So yeah, I guess I'm just thinking now, maybe one of the pitfalls that a lot of sales managers have is that they think, well, in order to get over all of these issues that we're having, let's just let's just throughput more sales calls, right? Let's do more live real world sales calls in order to iron out the kinks and to improve performance. But what you're saying here is really take a step back and maybe take 5 to 10% out of your total call time in the month to actually practice it offline or practice it internally, and ultimately that's going to pay back dividends, recover all of the time that you didn't spend dialing and then some, right? Because it's going to improve the overall the performance and the output and the successfulness of the calls that you are doing.
Yeah, and I don't want to say or make a claim like KPIs aren't important, because they are. So for example, if you're looking at how many calls you're making to how many appointments or discos you're actually scheduling.
Yeah.
Like that conversion rate would tell you like how good or how bad you are in terms of your cold calling skills. Mm-hmm. And then based on that conversion, excuse me, that would either tell me or your manager, hey, this is where we need to deliver prescriptive training to you, mm-hmm. Or not, right? Just based on conversion rates across each part of the sales stage that you own, whether you're an SDR, an AE, or even on the CSM front. So those conversion rates do matter. But like we also have to be mindful of like the soft skills.
Yeah, exactly.
Like when I'm talking to you, do I sound like nervous and I don't know what the hell I'm talking about? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And as a result, you're like, you know what, Tom, I'm not posting this podcast up at all. Because you sound totally fake. Or the flip side, which is like, holy shit, Tom knows what he's talking about. He sounds credible. He sounds authentic. And I think we need to do a part 2 of this podcast.
And it's not necessarily just something that people are born with as well, right? Because I think that's another misconception of sales managers, is that the confidence factor or the ability to talk confidently to people or whatever it is. There's loads of different ways that you could put it, like the bullshit factor, some people would call it, I suppose. But a lot of people say that that's something that you're born with, not necessarily something that you can train into people, right? But it certainly is something that you can train into people and really develop their confidence by doing these drills and exercises.
Yeah, I did my undergrad in engineering, so I think I lived with that engineering stereotype where like, here's a person like myself, totally introverted, can't talk at all, graduated from college, did the club scene. I was definitely one of those people like hugging the wall, right? I just didn't have the confidence or the skills just to, walk up to anyone and bust a move or anything. That's where practice comes into play.
Absolutely. Awesome. Okay, so moving on then, I guess, to your area of expertise, or OwnBackup's area of expertise, and to talk a little bit about tools and systems. So obviously a lot of people listen to these podcasts as well for recommendations for tools and to understand the tools that are out there. So first of all, it would be really good to understand from your perspective as someone that's teaching this stuff every day, and obviously you hear hundreds of pitches. So I'm not testing your pitching ability by any stretch, but I'm really interested to understand, why is it so important to have a CRM backup and restoration system in place? Because so many customers that I've spoken to, and I'm sure there's in fact most of them out there, that are actively using CRMs and they're not actively backing them up, and they don't have the ability to restore them if they needed to. So what are the main advantages of having a system like OwnBackup in place?
Yeah, and so I think the first thing to understand is just understanding how SaaS works, where the SaaS vendor, they're ultimately responsible for the software that they're delivering to you, right? So you being able to go to the website, whether it's salesforce.com or whatever the site is, and being able to log in, keep it secure, keep it up to date. On the flip side, what I think a lot of businesses or clients forget is that you're responsible for the data inside that SaaS environment, right? So if you go into your instance and you delete everything, or someone on your team deletes something by accident or on purpose, or you do some type of third-party integration, right? Let's say you wanted to import 1,000 leads from your marketing software that accidentally overwrites 1,000 existing leads in your instance. That's not the vendor's responsibility to restore that data. That's yours, right? They're only responsible for delivering the application to you safely and securely, right? And obviously redundancy and updates and all that stuff, that's their responsibility. I think what we all forget, in the SaaS world that we live in, is that you, as the user or the client, you're responsible for the data that you put in.
Sure.
And so, like, a great example of this, we were working with a banking client in the Northeast, and they were they ran this like evening like business intelligence software process with this tool every night, and it would do this type of process across all of their mortgage and loan documents. Mm-hmm. On one of those evenings, that BI tool ended up deleting all of their mortgage and loan documents. Holy crap.
I did.
Right? So if this happened without having any type of backup or recovery solution in place, like, just imagine, right? Like, this is an event that would absolutely wipe away your bank or business, because they were using Salesforce not only to manage all of these mortgage and loan documents, but to process invoices and payments. That was all gone.
Right.
Or they would have faced huge compliance issues, right, as it relates to the SEC and FINRA and all this other stuff. And then last but not least, like, the customer experience, tarnished, gone, right? Or maybe it would be great, right? Because now I don't have a mortgage to pay for. And it's a win-win.
True.
But in any case, because they were partnering with OwnBackup, they understood what the issue was. So they stopped the BI tool, like they paused that integration. And then they were able to go click, 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 and in a matter of minutes, like, restore that data back into Salesforce, business as usual. Right? So this is the problem that we're solving, specifically as it relates to the Salesforce Cloud, which for a lot of companies is how they are running most, if not all, of their business inside of Salesforce, whether it comes to prospecting deals, obviously closing those deals, from a financing standpoint, finance and billing standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, from just even a customer service standpoint. Everyone is using Salesforce as like as the operating system for their business. And so we're providing a solution where, because you're responsible for the data in Salesforce, you need to have a backup plan in place or a process in place where, should you lose data for any reason at all, and there's hundreds of ways to screw up data in Salesforce, Salesforce will never lose your data, right? Let's just make that clear for a second, right? Like, they have redundancy up to the wazoo. So the Salesforce, for all intents and purposes, will keep your data safe. But all you have to do is delete one account in Salesforce. And now you've just deleted all the contacts as it relates to that account, all the opportunities, all of your attachments, documents, contracts, invoices, payments. And if that's like $1 million account, oh my goodness.
Sure.
Which account did we lose? Where did we lose it? How do we restore it? Do we even have back, let's say, that contract or the invoices, in any other system, right? Like, it's a painful process just trying to restore that data back for one account.
Sure.
And now times that by 10 accounts or 100 accounts. So this is the problem that OwnBackup is solving. Yeah, I don't know what else to say, but
yeah, well, I mean, from my point of view, as someone that recommends and resells and implements CRM systems, it's certainly something that I wasn't as aware of before I started speaking to you. And then since we had our conversation before Christmas, I've been thinking about it a lot. And actually, I guess I'm going to be recommending moving forward, and I'd be interested to hear your opinion, that really any size business is susceptible to user error, which is probably 90% of the time it's going to be user error based issues that lead to this kind of data loss. So really any size business can fall into this trap. It's not just huge enterprises, but also small and medium sized businesses can suffer in exactly the same way, right?
Yeah, and again, whether you're a small business or you're an enterprise company, the question you have to ask yourself is how much is that data worth to you? Right?
Yeah. If it's, like you say, if it's the tool of record, if it's the operating system for your business, then really it could mean absolutely everything, right? Your entire business could flop based on one error. Could be as simple as that. So
yeah,
critically
and
important.
again, it could be as easy as someone pressing the delete key. It could be as complicated as some third-party integration connected to your Salesforce or SaaS app, and it does something that was unexpected. But at the end of the day, if you submit a support ticket to Salesforce or whoever the vendor is, like that, they're not going to be able to help you with that issue because you're responsible for your data, and they're not backing up like the previous version of your data in that instance. Like, you're responsible for doing that.
I guess that lack of understanding between the end user level and the provider level, so between Salesforce and their end user customers, the lack of understanding that your business is responsible for your data probably causes them a lot of issues, right? I imagine that they have a load of support tickets that are raised every day for issues actually that they can't fix, and really it's someone like you guys that are the only way of fixing some of these issues.
Yeah, I like making this like analogy because I think it's really relatable. But I always think about like my days in high school and using Microsoft Word. And Microsoft Word's interesting because it's like, whether you're a Supreme Court justice or a high school student, like we're all using the same application.
Yep.
And I learned this lesson the hard way in high school where I don't know if this like makes me old or not, but I think we were all using those old school floppy disks, right? 1.44 megabytes of storage.
Yep.
And at least when I was going to high school, I'd go to the school lab and print my homework out or whatever. But if you lose that disk, or someone is a jerk and just like breaks that disk in half, which happened to me once or twice, or there's like a million other like things that can happen to that floppy disk, right? Like you pour water or juice over it, whatever, like you are screwed. And one of the things I would do, and I didn't realize I was actually implementing a backup solution, but I would actually like email my homework to myself with AOL, right? So at least this way I had a backup of my homework sitting in my inbox. Should I lose my disk, I could just download it on the school computer, print my homework, good to go. But if you think about it from a Microsoft Word perspective, if I email the Microsoft Word team and I'm like, hey, I lost half of my Word document, like what are they going to do?
Exactly.
What are they going to say? They're just going to shrug their shoulders and tell me, hey, you should have been using your email with AOL, Dropbox, Google Drive.
Yeah.
Like the million other ways to back up your Word documents. But that's your responsibility.
Exactly. And dog ate my sales forecast isn't a good enough excuse, right? When you're speaking to your boss and you need to deliver that sales forecast that he's been waiting for, you can't say that it just got lost or destroyed or whatever. It needs to be something that you're responsible for. So
yeah. So I think a lot of companies have a plan in place, as it relates to protecting like your Word documents and files and, all of the stuff that we can actually relate to because it's like literally on your desktop or laptop. I think we all take it for granted when it comes to SaaS applications. And so from an enablement perspective on our end, it's how do we tell that story to our prospects, right? So just like when you and I connected and you got that oh shit moment, like holy nuts, like I can't believe I didn't know about this, and you're obviously in the space of helping CRM for the clients that you're working with. This is the job and the mission we need to do as well. And look, on our end, we're really happy if let's say, we would love every prospect to be a client, but if they don't become a client of ours, but they actually gained a lot of value and education by partnering with us and understanding and developing maybe a more comprehensive business continuity and resiliency solution because of the consultation we were able to give them throughout the sales process. It's a win on our end, but like we need to do that education part up front because it's not intuitive.
Exactly. And education is a core piece of any sales process, right? And I think, like you say, it's often overlooked. And really it should be the bedrock of what you're doing in your sales process. And in the modern age as well, particularly in your marketing process, it's all about education and exchange of value as well, right? Before people are willing to make a decision in your favor or support your content or have a conversation with you on the phone, they want to experience some free education from you first most of the time.
Yeah, and that's what we should be doing. We shouldn't be trying to push a product down anyone's throat. That's not how I like to buy when vendors are trying to, you know, recommend their sales enablement solution or whatever solution to me. And we have to have that perspective as well,
Exactly.
like when we're trying to do our part.
Exactly. Tell them something new, and they'll be much more open to listening to what you have to say next. Right? That's the key to it all.
That's right.
So, okay, so I realise that we're coming up to the time. I just wanted to ask you a couple of more personal questions about your career and your experiences. And you've got a wealth of knowledge in the sales space, in enterprise, but also with your teaching and other things as well. So I'm really interested to know this from you. So this is a question that I've been asking all of my guests recently. If you could go back and talk to the Tom of 21 years old and give yourself a really interesting golden ticket piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be that would help you to drive your career forward and maybe ultimately have experienced more success, or maybe experience success sooner than you otherwise did, if you could go back and give that advice now?
Yeah, so I tell this story whenever someone asks me like how I got into sales, because it wasn't like an immediate thing from studying engineering from undergrad to getting into sales.
Sure.
But what got me into sales was building up that level of confidence. And you're going to laugh. When I was in DC, I participated in this speed dating event. And so the name of the game, right? Like when you're 21, 22 is you're meeting with person after person. You got to deliver the best pitch possible. And you don't when you leave that table after 3 minutes and you don't get a phone number. And I think I did this with like over 50 people like that evening. But by the end of the night, especially like with the last set of people I met with, was able to walk away with 3 or 4 phone numbers. And this is like awesome. So I think the advice I would give to me is like, if I could just do that sooner, I think that would have pushed me a lot faster into sales. And I think the other advice I would give to myself at 21 is definitely make it a point to start and contribute to your 401k plan.
Right. Got you.
I think I started that when I was like 26 or 28 years old, but it only clicked with me then, like the power of time and compounding, right? Ability to growing your investments. So yeah, I think that would be the other advice, but that's pretty much it.
Sure. Yeah, and it relates back to what you were saying about practice makes perfect as well, right? The sooner you start practicing something and the more often you practice it, the more it compounds and the more it becomes a feature in your mind, and you will naturally deliver a better pitch or, write better emails or whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And the final question, what are you currently listening to, watching, reading online that's helping to contribute to your own professional development? Have you got particular websites that you like to go to, or podcasts that you listen to, for example, where you kind of absorb a lot of your knowledge and therefore pass it on to your teams as well?
Yeah, I am not a podcast person.
You're on one right now.
I know. I feel bad saying that. I'm happy to participate in podcasts. I haven't found like a podcast that I can like click with. I do listen to NPR a lot, so I don't know if you can, consider that a podcast. I know a lot of their shows are on podcasts.
Sure.
My CMO just pointed me to a book called Samurai Selling. It's definitely a book that I think was written maybe like 10 plus years ago. So I'm currently reading that book right now, but there's a ton of books as it relates to like sales enablement and like sales skills that I've read. I think one of the oldest books I have read and enjoyed is a book for sales engineers. And it was like written by this professor in the late 70s or early 80s. And it's interesting, like the skills he was teaching in his book are so applicable today, like whiteboarding. And we don't do this enough, I think, at OwnBackup or anywhere now, right? Because like, especially now when it's virtual, like where's the whiteboard?
Yeah.
But like, that's so important, right? To be able to take whatever solution or product you're trying to present and to be able to like literally take a whiteboard marker or a digital pen and illustrate that out to our prospect. It just helps connect the dots. And again, I don't know if you and I agree on this technical term right now, the oh shit moment. And it absolutely helps create that oh shit moment because we're
Yes.
connecting the dots um, and everyone's understanding what you're positioning. So those are if you want the link to that book or the actual author and the name of that book, I'm happy to
Yeah,
send
sure.
it.
Please do.
Post it in the
I'll pop it in the
description.
post when we post the podcast. I'll pop it in there as well. Yeah, that sounds good.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think just to add a point on that as well. There's the misconception I think at the moment is people like yourself, and I'm sure you have thought about this more as well, but the kind of blanket statement is, oh, it's really difficult to do visual pitching, whiteboarding virtually at the moment. But one simple thing that people can do is get one of those kind of digital pen sketch pads, right? They cost
Yep.
maybe $50, something like that. And it's a massive investment really, because it enables you to, you know, quickly draw up, grab a screen share, open a blank document, and you can do exactly the same as what you'd be doing in a face-to-face meeting with an actual whiteboard as well.
Yeah.
And I've seen people use that really effectively this year, and because there's a lack of it everywhere else, right, it's even more
Yeah.
pronounced than it was before. So that's a tip for people that are wondering
Yeah.
about how to do that.
And there's obviously a difference between doing it that versus showing the same visual elements in a PowerPoint or a Google slide. But the outcomes are clearly different when you're showing someone a Google slide of your solution versus, hey, let me tell a story and whiteboard this out with you. The way people connect the dots, and you get that dopamine hit in the brain effect going, like it's totally different and totally more impactful when it's being whiteboarded versus just a Google slide. That's my takeaway, at least based on my experience selling.
And the interactivity of the fact that you can kind of pivot your explanation based on their understanding or their own questions as well, right? So it's not a fixed formula that you're presenting, but something that you can adapt and pivot as you go through the process as well.
Yeah, and I was also really fortunate in my career where I think 8, 9+ years ago, I was working for an IT reseller in New Jersey. And because they were one of their top partners with VMware rolled out to all of their partners, or I think at least to their top partners, training on how to whiteboard their solution. And so that skill I've kept forever. And if you can master that skill, especially in the current age of Zoom, prospects are just going to be more engaged. They're going to turn on their camera. They're going to ask you more questions. They might even ask you, hey, can you tell me like where I can buy this on Amazon so I can do it too? But like that's what you want to build. And again, you come across as more authentic, credible, confident. And even if your pitch isn't as great as like everything else, all those other elements combined absolutely set you apart from the competition. And again, allows the prospect to make it really easy for them to take that follow-up meeting with you.
Yeah, just the fact that you went out of your way to go and buy it, even if you got next day delivery and it only cost $30, right? The fact that you went out of your way to do it and you gave it a go, I think a lot of people would respect that for sure. So yeah, there you go. That's a top tip from this podcast. Awesome. Okay, well, thanks very much, Tom. Really appreciate your time. And yeah, let's do it again sometime in the future. Really keeping an eye on OwnBackup's progress at the moment, and really interested to see where you guys go this year. So good luck with that as well, and with your teaching and your personal pursuits and everything else. And I'm sure we'll catch up again later on in the year.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm just going to do a quick note to the audience. Guys, if you enjoyed this one, please like, share, comment. Lets me know that you're enjoying the content. And if you want to see another one from Tom, or you've got a recommendation for someone else that I should speak to, please do let me know. All right, then. Thank you very much, guys. And thanks, Tom. Cheers.
Cheers.